And welcome to the Press Start Podcast, Press Start Australia's weekly video game discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ewan, joined today by my fellow gamers and co-hosts, Shannon,
Hello.
James,
Hello.
Brody,
Hello.
and Harry.
Hello.
On the show today, we're going to be talking about Street Fighter VI, Gollum, and The Last of Us factions. But Harry, you're joining us on the podcast, which I think it might have only been your second, third time on the show. It's not often we get Harry. Does that sound
I
about
think
right?
the last time was Elden Ring, which would have been
Elden Ring.
Yeah.
So it's first on the
A
video.
little over a year ago.
Been up for
First
a
on the
while.
video.
First on the video, yes. it is.
Video debut. Well, we're lucky enough to have you on the show today because you're here
Face
to share
reveal.
your review.
Face reveal.
of-
Highly
You're
anticipated, I'm sure.
You're here to share your review of Diablo 4. And first, I want to ask, what's your history with Diablo? Have you played Diablo games in the past?
Yeah, I played a lot of 3. I think 3 is probably the one I played the most. I played it on PC and Reaper of Souls, which is like the major expansion. I also played it on Switch when they did the Eternal Collection, I think it's called. And then also played Diablo 2 Remastered last year, I think that was.
Right. So plenty of Diablo experience coming into your review. How did you then find 4?
I really liked it. I loved it, actually. It feels much more in line with Diablo 2 as opposed to like 3 or Immortal. It's much more grounded, like not just in art style, but in like the way it approaches narrative and characters. It was a good time all around. It feels like a Blizzard title of old is the best way to describe it. Just like really feature complete, polished. Yeah.
I noted in your review you said it wasn't just like a return to form for Diablo, but Blizzard more generally.
Yeah, well, it feels like recently with like the cancellation of like Overwatch 2's PvE mode and among other things, Diablo Immortal really didn't please people. It feels like remarkably like high quality. There's like a clear focus and intent. Like it felt like the team really wanted to make it. There's a lot of love poured into it, I think.
Yeah, I think you noted how kind of tight the direction was, and it sounds like it was pretty clear that there was like a particular vision that they had that they wholeheartly sought to deliver.
I think that's why it's like drawn so much attention from like pre-release marketing and things like that, because it comes through in the trailers as well. Like that cinematic that they revealed at the Game Awards, I think it was. Just like the tone and the mood that they managed to set with their art direction and world design is really impressive. And that sort of like holds through the entirety of the game as well. It goes a long way to setting up like a believable world.
You mentioned the narrative and that cinematic trailer again that you've just referenced there. Like that appealed to me as someone that's got no attachment to Diablo. Like what would you think is like fair to compare the narrative to if you were to try and like entice me to play the game as a newcomer?
I don't know.
You know I love a good story.
Yeah, I would say it's like most similar to. I would say Diablo 2, but I mean, you probably from like the perspective of a series outsider. I don't know. It's quite unique in the way that like, they like sort of detail the conflict between heaven and hell, like angels and demons. Like instead of saying one side is right, it's sort of like a gray area, especially in 4. The reality is that it's like somewhere in the middle. I think like 3 sort of leaned into the idea of like, heaven and angels, and like everyone loves Tyrael, right? Who's like this really cool angel and he's super mega powerful, like a paragon, that sort of thing. Diablo 4 doesn't really have any of that. It's much more based in like the humans that are caught in the conflict in between. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what to compare it to be honest. It's a hard one. It feels quite unique. In that sense.
Well, that's a good thing nonetheless. I noted as well that you said there was potential to create a number of different character builds. So what sort of play styles were you gravitating towards in the game? What other ones kind of caught your eye as well?
Yeah. I played Rogue for like all of my campaign playthrough, which was, I think the campaign was close to 15 hours, maybe a bit more. And I also did a bunch of post-game on the same character as well. The build that I ended up landing on, rogues, like obviously like swords, bows, crossbows, daggers, that sort of thing. but like a lot of their skills focus on traps, and also like what the game calls imbuements, which is basically like imbuing your weapons with an element. Um, you like rogue could choose from three elemental imbuements, but I ended up using shadow, which makes enemies vulnerable, so they take more damage. And if you kill them with shadow damage, they'll explode as well. So I sort of gravitated towards this glass cannon build, where you get in enemies' faces, hit them with shadow, and they all eventually explode into showers of loot. But there was also like that was sort of a ranged melee hybrid build. You could go like strictly range, or if you wanted, you could go all melee. You could go heavier into traps, heavier into like focusing on your imbuements. There's stealth ability, so you can go invisible, and that's just the rogue. Like that's one of I think 5 classes at launch. So it's pretty expansive in terms of like the options you have. I know that the barbarians have like weapon specialties, where if you use a certain class of weapon for long enough, you gain more proficiency with it. Necromancer, you've got like your typical minion control, but also like shadow and blood magics and things like that. And I'm sure that like, I didn't have the time to test every single class, but I'm sure that also extends to the druid, which is a new class, sorcerer, the other ones that they have there as well. So plenty of options.
And I seem to recall you as well talking about the progression system as well, and how kind of rewarding that was.
Yeah.
Like how these new abilities you're picking up, are they coming at you pretty thick and fast as well?
Yeah, the level cap is level 50. So you have 50 or 49 skill points to play around with technically. Because once you hit 50, you start what's called Paragon. But you're leveling up pretty quickly. You're getting XP for like everything you're doing. Main story quests, side quests, cellars, dungeons, like discovering new areas gives you XP. It's being like given to you hard and fast all the time. And then you also have region reputation, which is like you do side quests and things in regions to gain like reputation in these zones that will give you additional skill points, alongside other things. So you're getting skill points all the time, to invest in this tree, sort of like a typical skill point tree, I guess. But
So
the
that's
coolest
where
thing,
some of the exploration becomes quite rewarding. Then, I
yeah,
take it.
exactly. Like you always get something out of it. But what's cool is that you can respec all of your points at any time for like a gold cost, and you're getting money all the time, so it doesn't really feel like too expensive if you want to just completely respec everything, and try something else. And that isn't reliant on your equipment, and like your armor and things like that. You can pretty well try something out whenever the hell you feel like it, which is like really cool. Some added flexibility.
I
Allows
love
you to
being able to play around with different abilities.
yeah,
Makes
exactly.
easy
It
like
means that like if you invest points in something that maybe you aren't gelling with after a few hours, you can just respec, try something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brody, to jump over to you, have you played any Diablo games at all? Has Diablo 4 caught your eye?
Yeah, I played Diablo 3 a bit on Xbox with a few mates, and we got into it a bit. Like, I think we finished the story, which was probably rare for me for that sort of game at the time. We played around with, like, some of the Torment levels, and then they left me behind there because I wasn't really up to it. I did play the beta for this one, and it is obviously markedly pretty different. I've heard everyone say online that it sort of recaptures that tone and feel from 2, so which is obviously probably one of the more celebrated games in the series. But yeah, I probably played that beta till I got to about level 20, got a handful of story missions in, and I can definitely see the appeal of the narrative because I'm a pretty big narrative guy too. So yeah, I'm definitely keen to get into it. It looks like it's gonna. With the way you're talking about how like XP is like a constant thing that ticks over, it's just going to keep like feeding that part of my reptile brain that I'm just like, ooh, maybe I'll play Destiny again as well. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what it's like.
Going for those dopamine hits.
There's one more thing.
That's right.
And it is cooperative, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
It's a big part of the
I
game.
only played a little bit of co-op. Obviously, review window is quite limited. But the entire campaign is co-op. A lot of the end game stuff I did felt built for co-op. Like I was able to do it solo.
Sure.
Barely. It was very difficult. And you can unlock higher world tiers and things like that. It's also split screen on consoles, which is cool. You have couch co-op on PS5 and your Xbox consoles. So
Do you know how progression works for the cooperative sort of experience? Is it kind of tied to you as a player, or can you progress your own
I
story whilst
believe
playing with a friend?
it's yeah, you can progress it. I'm not
Nice.
100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I recall the developers saying that any progress you make with another player will carry over, unless you're skipping parts of the story that you haven't done yet. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what we love to hear. Okay, cool. Then my last question for you on Diablo 4, seeing as you seem to be speaking so positively about it, I think your score is nice and high as well.
yeah.
Is this a Game of the Year contender in your mind?
Mm, I think it
Knowing
really
that
depends.
Zelda exists.
Yeah,
Without a
it's hard.
doubt.
I mean, I think it
As
definitely has the potential to be nominated for sure.
yeah,
Like it's good because it does what it does really well, but I wouldn't say that it breaks any new ground. Like it doesn't really do anything that Diablo hasn't already done really well,
sure.
or other ARPGs for that matter. Which I think is what a lot of people tend to look for in Game of the Year. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it did get nominated and it was part of the voting process and things like that. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
maybe it would make like a top 10 list, but a top 5 it might struggle.
definitely a
Something
top
like that.
10. Definitely a top 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
like definitely think people should check it out, especially if you're a fan of like looters, Diablo, anything like that. You love those
Yeah.
like gear progression, that sort of thing, ARPGs. Yeah, definitely
Well, it
worth
certainly
checking out.
sounds like for Diablo fans, there's a lot to love. But yeah, like as I mentioned, as a newcomer, I'm intrigued by this one, particularly a cooperative sort of experience too, with a strong narrative that generally seems to speak to me.
Yeah.
You can, of course, find Harry's full review over on the website at pressstart.com.au, where you'll also find James's review of Street Fighter 6. And speaking of a return to form, James, it sounds like you rather enjoyed Street Fighter 6.
Yeah, I did, Ewan. Who would have thought? No, but like real talk, like Street Fighter Five launched really, really badly, and it took like them a good 2 to 3 years to really like get on top of it all. But this
Mm.
just like hits a home run in every aspect from the beginning. Like I think it's really exciting to have like a fighting game. And it's interesting to as well, just quickly, like it's the first fighting game I think since Smash Ultimate to get like above 90 on meta, which is like crazy when you think about how much stuff has come out since then.
Yeah,
But it's genuinely good. Like it's trying to, because Street Fighter Five was very much they kind of pushed it out so that people could get going for esports and stuff, and that's like fine to do, and I get that that's your hardcore audience, but it really misses like there was no content in there for like anyone else. Um,
sure.
so like I feel like with this they've really tried to appeal to people who want to play solo or people who want to play like hardcore, with just all these different modes and options and different ways to play. Yeah, like and not like kind of neglecting anybody in the process. Like I think that's the difference here is like there's like it's hard to put into like words. If you want to
So
see my words, go read my review. But
I thought you were going to say there it was missing like an appeal to casual players, which I thought maybe you were referring to its shortage of costumes, which I think was one of your like handful of complaints to it. Not that you
yeah, I
had
think I
many.
think I think in terms of casual players, I just mean like some people pick up a fighting game to play through like an arcade mode, see the story,
Yeah,
um, and just do other stuff besides just fight each other online in like a tournament
sure.
setting. Um, and I think like NetherRealm has really got that down really well with Mortal Kombat, and that is why that game sells so well. I think is because it is so appealing to such a wide range of people. But this did feel like a step in the right direction in that there's a full blown single player mode, which is like a semi open world action RPG in the world tour mode. But then there's
Mm,
also all this other cool shit for the multiplayer, which we'll get into later, I guess. Um, but world tour mode has like one of the most in depth character creators that I think I've ever seen in a video game. Like I don't know how you can just create literally anything, and if you were to Google this shit that people be making in the beta, most of it's like horrible, but you can
this is the
literally,
look of your character, I take it. Yeah,
yeah.
not just like
So you like
specking on
create your
stuff.
own
Yeah,
character in World Tour. You create your own character, take them through take them through a story, basically,
yeah,
while exploring like all these different areas around the world and recruiting people and learning their style, like as in characters from the game, and then like, creating your own character from the moves you learn from them. So you get to create your own like little Street Fighter, um, or big Street Fighter, I guess, depending on your size. But yeah, like it's a really really cool system, a cool idea. the actual story is interesting. I don't really want to get into the end of it because it gets pretty dark pretty quick, which is quite surprising. Um, but overall, like, yeah, it's a really solid single player offering. I did say in my review, and I don't know if this is unfair, but like I can see this formula working better with Mortal Kombat because that has different worlds to go and explore that are much more, like, out in those games. There's just a lot more into the lore and the characters and stuff, I feel. Whereas with Street Fighter, it's really just you meet somebody, they want to become the best fighter, they teach you some moves. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like a crazy like amount of difference in the characters and the motivations because there's not a lot of that lore. I mean, there is lore obviously in the Street Fighter world, but not as much as say something like Mortal Kombat. But overall, like, it's fun to just go around and just beat people up. Like, it's like you can literally just like hit someone, it goes straight into a fight, no load screens or anything like that. Battle them, get some XP, and then go on your way exploring and finding more
Sounds
stuff.
like a Pokemon encounter the way you describe it like that.
A little, but a little bit more action heavy, I would say. But it gets like kooky. Like you break into like a science lab and you have to fight fridges that are spitting food at you, or like there's like a gang that they wear boxes on their heads and that's how they like identify themselves. So you're fighting these like blind box people.
I wish I could fight the fridge in Atomic Heart. This sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Well, yeah. At least you don't want to do anything else to the fridge in Atomic Heart. Is all I'll say on that front.
I've seen a bit of sentiment online about it like being really good for newcomers, which is interesting to me because I don't think I've played the last few, but I used to play a lot of Street Fighter back in the day. And it sounds like the World Tour mode and it having a story like definitely lends itself to those who just want to play through that.
I did want to ask you about the different control schemes as well, James, because there is like a much more approachable control scheme in 6, right?
Yeah, so just quickly going to what Shannon said, World Tour mode is like a really good way to learn the game without just sitting through a bunch of tutorials. Like, it does a really good job of introducing you to all the concepts and stuff. But yeah, the other side of that coin, I would say, is I do feel like fighting games are quite overwhelming for a lot of people, especially if like you're playing against somebody who's been playing them for ages. Like, and it's hard to like, if you're good at a fighting game, it's hard to like kind of scale it back and play like poorly so that your friends can win. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really hard. Yeah. But with there's like 2 extra control schemes that you can use in this game. One's called modern, one's called dynamic. Modern basically simplifies the controls to like a 4-button setup rather than 6. I know that probably doesn't sound like a lot, but it just makes it easier for people to, you don't have to put in these complicated like command strings or anything to pull off attacks. You just need to like press a direction, a button, and a move will come out. Or you hold a trigger and press a button, and combos will come out. And that's like really cool to me, like, because I feel like it takes away a lot of that sense of like overwhelmingness. But it also like the if you means you can push out a lot of moves quicker. So because of that, there is a slight damage scale in place. So you do slightly less damage, but you can do a lot more in a span of, say, 30 seconds than like a normal player could. And then on top of that, there's dynamic mode, which is basically just I would never play it myself or let anyone in my house play it. But like, you just mash a button and you can just do all this cool shit. Like, it's super simple, it's basically really good if you've got at a party, I guess, and you just want to chuck it on and nobody knows what they're doing. And you can just do some cool shit by mashing buttons. So that's like a cool touch. I didn't think they needed to do that, but the fact they have is really cool. And I think it's just like, I feel like a lot of fighting games, like I said, have this problem where they're just overwhelming and they're a little bit gatekeepy in a way. Like I even just said then, I wouldn't let people play dynamic mode. But like, so I'm part of the problem. But like, I genuinely feel like this is quite an earnest way to get people into fighting games, if they have been wanting to for a while. Because like yes, like in Dragon Ball you had auto combo and stuff like that, but those all feel kind of like whatever. Whereas this is like a full control scheme that's reflected in the move list. Like it just feels like a lot of more effort and thought has been put into it, which I think is great. Like, I think it's a really good like initiative. I hope it does pay off for them. Obviously critically it has, and even that, I feel like in saying that, like, a lot of critics have resonated with this a lot more than other fighting games, and I do genuinely feel like that is because it is so much easier to get into and it teaches you all the concepts in such a clever way. right down to like if you like a specific character, there's like specific things that will teach you through the basics of the character, and then advanced stuff you can do with the character for every
Yeah,
character.
cool.
Like I just think that's like a really cool. I know a lot of fighting games do that already, obviously. But the way that Street Fighter 6 lays it all out is just like very approachable. Is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, that all really speaks to me. Like I've very, very rarely play a fighting game. They're really not my cup of tea. Like I think we've spoken about that on the show in the past. But like Brawl, I enjoyed, or Ultimate, I should say. That would have been the more recent one I played. Anyhow, the Super Smash Bros. Brawl games. I've also always struggle saying that title. I've always enjoyed, but yeah, I've liked in the past how they've had a bit of a loose story kind of setting up the fights. So I'm glad that this does too. And yeah, like even kind of tutorials I can go through to kind of learn some of those different move sets. Like that all resonates with me as well. It's just a very busy year. So I don't know if I'll get around to playing this, but at least like
I think the thing with Street Fighter
that this has
though is like the story doesn't like yes the story is there and it's good, but like you can jump in at any point and like the cool thing about 6 is it's only going to get better. Like they're just going to keep adding more characters or tweaking the moves that might be a little bit overpowered or whatever. Like it can only get better from here. It's not like 5 where the future was in question. Yeah, so like jump in whenever you want, and I think like Capcom is expecting that. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. It's the one to try. I'm interested to see if Mortal Kombat will do anything similar where they're trying to appeal to newer characters, newer people or not. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be curious to see how all of these fighting games kind of shake out at the end of the day, isn't it? Well, I'm pleased to hear that you both enjoyed Diablo 4 and Street Fighter 6, but I was disappointed, and I guess not all that surprised to see that Gollum is languishing in the reviews. Shannon, maybe I'll come to you first on Gollum, because I know you have some sort of weird fascination with the character. What was your reaction to seeing the review scores kind of gradually come in? And when can you last recall a game reviewing so poorly?
Yeah, like this feels like the first one that's been like shat on. Just like really shat on, not like a couple of 6s. Like I'm talking like 1, 2, 3s and 4s. I can't remember like in my like 10 years of press start, I can't remember a game with like such notoriety. Like Lord of the Rings is one of the biggest franchises in the world that has come out in that state. Like even as a licensed game, like you get your 5s and 6s, but this is like broken and awful.
Maybe the only one would be Colonial Marines. Like Aliens?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But even like this was like the first next gen reveal. Like this was like it was put on a pedal. Like this should have been good. Like it got all the covers. It got so much notoriety. Like it was being like put on a pedestal by NVIDIA and like next gen console makers is like this graphical powerhouse. I need to see Gollum like floating through the air in like a glitch state in video.
I will say this is like one of the best things about TikTok is like getting clips like this just like,
so good.
To you.
And in a weird way, like I'm sure it is working for its marketing. Maybe not to this level. Like it is like broken and crap.
So bad it's good kind of thing.
It's probably selling more than it would have like without it.
Yeah. It's sad. I don't get how it's come out in this state, to be honest, given the length it's taken.
Well, the developer has since apologized for the state of the game and committed to fixing what they can, which would be the bugs and technical stuff, but the overall game design is not likely to improve, unfortunately. Brody, how have you rated, I guess, the reaction to the reviews, and like how could you expect them realistically to respond to the kind of reviews they're getting?
Look, I think they've more or less copped it on the chin, haven't they? Like they've basically said, yeah, look, we know it's probably not that good. We might be capable of better. Like I don't even know what else Daedalic have done. Look, it's unfortunate, but I think they've probably just taken it in stride and they'll probably be happy to move on to the next thing once they patch this into whatever state it winds up being.
And they have.
Yeah. It was an interesting, I'm sure you watched this too, Brody, but it was an interesting tidbit to come out of Phil Spencer's conversation with Kinda Funny a few weeks back, like off the back of Redfall's poor reviews.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of saying, like, look, we kind of mock review these, and we had an inkling of how this was going to do, and like we knew it had some shortcomings, but he didn't seem to he seemed to be surprised that it was reviewed as negatively as it was, and perhaps the mock reviews were a little bit more generous than what they were in reality. Do you think in a situation like this, Gollum, they kind of knew what was coming, or would any of this have been a surprise?
I don't like. All it took for I'm sure everyone was in the same. Yeah. We really thought Gollum was going to be a
sweep. Gollum sweep at the Game Awards.
I feel like it only takes looking at that screenshot where he's sitting there to know that this game was not going to be not going to be great.
You're going to have to watch the video version of the podcast on YouTube to see Brody's impersonation of Gollum there.
I think we should all do it. We should all do it now. Make it the
Maybe
thumbnail.
we should do it for the thumbnail. Yeah. I was genuinely going to say we should get the thumbnail at some point in this episode. Do we all want to do a Gollum impersonation?
That's good, James. That's good.
The Gollum episode.
Thanks.
Anyhow, it's still reported that they're working on another game based on the Lord of the Rings. Harry, maybe I'll come to you. Can you see this eventuating? And if so, can they turn things around?
I don't know. I guess it really depends on Gollum sales and how it's WB publishing, right? Like how committed they are to it. Like Brody, I don't know what else. Yeah, I don't know what else Datalic have worked on. It's obviously
Gollum sales,
like a Far Cry
adventure games.
Yeah.
It's literally just point and click adventure games.
So it's obviously doing better than it would have with all this like you said, TikTok's viral marketing, people talking about it is generating some interest. But it's definitely a far cry from Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War and Middle Earth games.
Can I say
it'll be interesting
Gollum,
to see if go for
Gollum
it.
is one of my favorite characters of all time. But this sounded shit
why.
from the start. A stealthy Gollum game sounds like absolute arse, and it did from day one.
I just think
the second
all
I heard
the
about it, it
characters
sounded awful.
Pick from Lord of the Rings. Why?
Well, he can't do anything. Exactly. He can't do anything. He needs to be sidekick to someone who can fight.
Following from Middle Earth as well probably doesn't help because that was quite a solid Lord of the Rings adaptation in a way.
Yeah, not good. Stealth is so hard to do in games, in good games, let alone when you make that your whole thing. As cute as Gollum is, it's not going to happen.
It's been done well before, but with just far more interesting characters than Gollum, Dishonored or Hitman.
Mate, settle down. This is going to get personal. The whole Lord of the Rings franchise is based around him. He's pretty interesting.
Based around him? What are you talking about?
Literally.
But interesting as a character doesn't necessarily translate to gameplay, right?
He was trying to take it for himself. He was trying to stop it.
Who would have thought this episode would have resulted in Shannon and I coming to blows over Gollum? Well, I do hope we see another Lord of the Rings game, the quality of the Middle Earth games, at some point in the future. And at the same time, I hope one day we'll see The Last of Us Factions, which had some concerning news surrounding it this week, following a report from Bloomberg suggesting development had slowed down at the studio as the studio reassessed the game's quality and longevity and reevaluate its direction. Naughty Dog released a statement saying the game needed more time. Brody, I'm going to come back to you. Does this game see the light of day?
I think it definitely does. Yeah, of course. I think it definitely comes out. This is why they brought Bungie in, isn't it? To make sure that these things are going to end up having legs. Because last thing you want is to pump this thing out, I guess, from a developer, Naughty Dog, who doesn't have that sort of pedigree, I guess, to put out a live service game. So, it is a setback, sure, and I'm sure your little heart broke during the week, but I think this is ultimately for the better of it. But if it doesn't see the light of day, I'm working on a tinfoil theory that Bungie are still working for Xbox. They're still they're being paid by Xbox to sabotage all these live service games. Yeah, but no, seriously, I think it comes out definitely. They can't take a hit like this.
James, would it surprise you to hear that I played some of the original Last of Us Factions yesterday?
No, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
And let me tell you, the only people still
Fantastic
playing
game.
that game are like hardcore and they don't mess around. And for someone that hasn't played it in like 10 years to dive back in, it was not a good time. But yeah, Brody mentioned Bungie reportedly being brought on to consult on the game, and they questioned the game's kind of long-term appeal. It certainly seems that people have fallen off the original bar, a few passionate few. What do you think that Factions needs to do in future to sustain a long-term player base?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah, I'm
Sorry,
asking you
is
that
that-
question. Probably the
I mean, I
least
don't-
qualified person to
Well, it was
Yeah,
never going to
I-
be for James, so that's.
I could never see the appeal of this in the first place. But I mean, if they have a plan,
played...
I feel like if they have a plan, like in terms of like long-term content, like making sure they're adding stuff to it, and I feel like with this, a lot of people care about The Last of Us because of the story more so than the game. So like, I feel
Sure.
like there would have to be some kind of angle there that kind of fleshes out the world a bit more. I don't think it can just be a typical service-based game. It almost,
Yeah.
I feel like Bioshock 2 vibes almost, if anyone remembers that. That was kind of the idea of that. Didn't get executed that well, but yeah, like I think that's what the main point of difference would have to be, but then that seems to be too expensive, so like I don't know if that's something they would do for like free content drops, you know?
Yeah. It might be cool
so
if there was
yeah.
like some sort of like settlement kind of builder component to it as well. Like what I liked about Factions and like what the stress of the game was that like there's kind of this through line to each game that you've got like a band of survivors that are represented on your lobby screen that you're gradually adding to by completing challenges. And the bigger it grows, the better you need to perform in games to kind of sustain your survival group or survivor group, whatever it's called. Like basically you need to earn enough points within each game to kind of keep them fed and healthy and stuff.
I mean,
And
it
so
could
it
be,
provides
yeah,
this kind of nice stressful thing. So if they expanded on that sort of idea and embedded some story into it as well, that could be neat. But
that's kind of what State of Decay is. Like I
yeah,
can't,
yeah,
I don't know if that's the angle they should take, but yeah.
that could be neat.
It's hard to do that and keep the quality of story and characters and narrative like that The Last of Us has, which
it
is
would
going to be
have
the
to be
big
different.
challenge with this. It's tough, right? Like there's not many live service games that do well. Like most of them do well initially, but none of them really last more than, like, you're lucky if you last a month and still have a decent player base compared to your first week. And the last thing Sony would want is that happening to a franchise like this that's like just had 30 million people watching its debut season on HBO. So
Yeah,
it's hard. I wonder if they had their time again, would they just drop something Factions like in The Last of Us Part 1 remake or something, do you think?
yeah.
I don't know, going back to what James
easier.
said, like I feel like a lot of the appeal with Last of Us and like Naughty Dog in general is like story and character stuff. And like it has been like I feel like the reaction to this being like pushed back has been a bit like blown out of proportion, probably because it's been so long since our last Naughty Dog game, and people really want to see what's next. And there also might be this like pre-built expectation of what Factions is going to look like, given their recent stuff. But if it comes out like as strictly live service, which like Shannon said, notorious for not delivering, like only recently in the last few years has Bungie gotten a grip on how to tell stories through Destiny, which has been going for 10 years now. And even then, they dropped the ball with Lightfall this year. Like, if Factions can't deliver, like, so many people are going to fall off of it because that's the core of it for them. Like, if the characters aren't there and the narratives aren't there, like, it's going to lose interest for so many people, I feel.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm like in the minority here. My brother has just texted me asking if I want to play more Factions. There you go. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I don't feel like I need a game that I could play for 10 years. And I don't feel like I need a Last of Us story from this game. Like if Part 3 eventuates, which I'm sure it will, like that's the sort of story I want. Or I'm not fussed about it too much in Factions. I just kind of want to see what idea they had for multiplayer kind of come to life, particularly if there's some sort of cooperative sort of element to it. But like I think the idea behind Factions is really quite a neat one, and if that was given a bit more sort of modern polish and a fresh sort of execution, it could be really quite a neat thing. Maybe it wouldn't do the numbers of Fortnite or whatever, but like, does it need to? Can it not be a game that you spend $60 on and play for a year? Like, why does...
Well, I think it can, but that would be a change of strategy. Like, I think if this was going to be a live service, it probably would have been free, or like we were saying, in the top tier of PlayStation Plus or something like that, and they would have made their money back through transactions.
Sony, especially with the showcase, has kind of demonstrated that they are moving towards that. So, like, I think that's why we're kind of assuming that's what they want to make factions into.
I guess my issue is like a broader one with PlayStation strategy as it pertains to live service games. Maybe it's not strictly speaking Last of Us factions, but yeah, their strategy more broadly. Anyhow, I'm sure we'll talk about that plenty more in the future. I do have a rapid fire question for you all, and I want to circle back to Gollum, which you discussed earlier in the show, and like ask on a more personal level, what was a game that you were looking forward to that ultimately fell flat or didn't hit nearly as hard at launch as you wanted to? Brody's thinking. You're all looking like you're thinking. Shannon, let's start with you. What's a game you were super excited for?
God, that's tough.
I can tell what my answer is if you want, if that would help.
Go for it. Just kick us off.
I remember back in, I think I was high school, weirdly being excited for the Medal of Honor reboot. I don't know why. I think I was like a Battlefield fan, and I looked at trailers of that game and thought, this game's gonna be the shit.
This is it.
Came out, and it was just shit. And yeah, I remember reading the reviews at the time and going, fuck.
I'd say like Jak 3 for me. Like Jak 2 is like one of my favorite games of all time, and it's not bad, but like it's not as good as Jak 2, and it took a step backwards in terms of like what it was. So for me, I'd say that I remember like not loving as much. Still played through it, but it wasn't as groundbreaking.
Yeah, that's fair. James?
There's like two that really stick out in my mind. The first one is Resident Evil 6. Super excited for that. All my favorite characters in the first game, in the game together for the first time. And it was just like a bloated, distended mess. And then
bloated and distended. Wow.
Yes, at once. And then Mortal Kombat versus DC was like pretty disappointing. Like that should be good, right? Like, you know, all these cool DC characters, all these cool Mortal Kombat characters fighting against each other. And then like it comes out, they weren't allowed to make it MA or anything above because of the characters. Like, you're not allowed to rip off Batman's head, and the heroes can't kill people, so they've only got like non-lethal attacks. Like it was just it wasn't good. It bankrupted the company. That's how much we know. like it killed Midway. But yeah, that's probably
Harry, I saw you nodding along with a lot of that. Did you have another you wanted to mention there?
Controversial pick. Deathloop.
Breath of the Wild. Oh, Deathloop. Oh, yeah, that is
interesting.
Controversial.
Yeah, big arcane guy. I was really excited for it because I love Moon Crash, and Deathloop is basically Moon Crash but bigger. And I was very disappointed.
Yeah. What about it didn't capture you?
I feel like it just doesn't. No, I could go on about why I dislike Deathloop for a very long time. But the gist of it is that I don't think it delivers on the premise at all. I don't think it has like the same flexibility of player choice as their prior games. And it's just like way more watered down and simplified than it probably should have been.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you holding back because I feel like you're trying to pay rapid fire question the respect it deserves, but it was nice to get a bit more detail on that. And Brody, what's your answer?
Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and more recently, Anthem. That's really I suppose. Good. Anthem was meant to be hot as fuck, and it was just shit.
Anthem did sting.
Yeah, I thought about Anthem as well.
Yeah, that might have been another one that really just like you read the reviews for that coming out. It's like this is way below what everyone was expecting.
Evolve too. What happened to Evolve? Turtle Rock fucked up.
Evolve, true. Yeah. Speaking of games with that much longevity to them. Evolve was one of those. Speaking of games, though, with lots of longevity to them, we're still going years later. What the Wiki is the Press Start podcast game show where the previous week's winner reads part of a Wikipedia page for an unknown game, and we, the contestants, must guess the game. A point is awarded for each correct guess, and the round ends after one person scores 2 points. Currently tied in first place, we have Brody and James with 14 points apiece. I am just behind on 1, Kieran just behind again on 12, Shannon on 9, James W on 0, and Harry entering the scoring today. Maybe you can bag a couple of points in the process. As last week's winner, James, you are in the hosting chair today. Take it away.
Okay, let's go, fam. Everyone's ready. Good. The game is an action-adventure puzzle platformer, and the player controls the main protagonist. Environments are seen through a controllable third-person view. The camera's view changes to different positions, triggered by entering certain areas or performing certain actions. The player character can be moved in all directions, and they're able to manipulate large objects, such as blocks and levers, connected to mechanisms. It's so generic, Shannon. What do you think it is?
Secret Agent Clank.
It's not. Sorry.
Ewan.
Yes, Ewan.
The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
You guys are fucked up. No. The main character restores health by... The main character... No, it wasn't. The main character restores health by drinking water from pools and fountains.
Brody.
Collecting sand increases the... Yes, Brody.
Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
Oh,
It is Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
Yes.
May she rest
Well
in peace.
done, Brody.
Well, no, she's been rebooted and she's starting again.
2027.
God bless.
But
on the way.
rebooted, like defibrillated to the chest, you mean, yeah?
Yeah. I don't know what the word for it is, but it's almost necromancy at this point. Okay, let's go. The game is a player versus environment video game. In the game, the player assumes control of a blank, who must complete a series of challenges set by a sinister artificial intelligence to uncover a way to destroy it. The game features multiple suits of armor, with each having its own weapons and abilities. For instance, Roadblock is a tank character who is equipped with a shield, the Witch Doctor is a supporting character who can heal other players, and Barrage is an explosives expert. Yes, Shannon.
Nah, I don't. Overwatch 2 or
It's
1.
not, babe. Sorry.
I don't know. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
Secret Agent.
Players can change their
Literally.
classes during gameplay or apply rigs to their characters, which grant abilities from other classes. Players can also progress through the game's survival path to unlock new skins and cosmetic items. It's coming. Get ready, everyone. The main mode in the game is Dino Survival. 2 teams of 5 players must race against each other.
Shannon.
Harry was first.
Oh,
he was.
That's gonna be a listen back.
Harry
I
was
think
definitely
Harry was
first.
You'll
first. I
regret
think
that.
I heard it too.
Exo
see.
Primal.
It is Exo Primal. Congratulations,
Well
Harry.
done, Harry. Entering and scoring.
Okay. Let's go. Harry won. Brody won.
There's an
Shannon
apology
none.
brewing. I can feel it.
He was clearly first.
No way.
Okay.
Imagining things.
We'll
Shannon.
see.
You should have
Okay,
played
the
the beta,
game is a
Shannon.
real-time strategy game, and it requires players to build a base with structures to produce units, gather resources, research upgrades, and provide defenses. Units are used to attack the enemy and defend the player's base. Unlike the first game, players can build
Brody.
an unlimited number of structures anywhere on the map. Yes, Brody.
StarCraft 2.
No. Players can
Shannon.
build walls to... Yes, Shannon.
Age of Empires 2.
No. Along with this, each
Ewan.
faction's...
Civilization 2.
No.
Damn it.
Each faction's fortress is uniquely equipped with a special power
Going
reached
back.
only by purchasing necessary upgrades. The game's HUD, called the Palantir, shows the player's hero units and their abilities, a minimap, and objectives. The story is divided into good and evil campaigns. The good campaign focuses on
Shannon.
Glorfindel. Yes, Shannon.
Warcraft 2.
No.
Brody.
The good campaign focuses on Glorfindel, an elf who is alerted to a planned attack on the elven sanctuary of Rivendell.
Oh,
With help
God,
from the dwarves
okay.
and other good forces, the elves attempt to eliminate... Yes, Brody.
God.
Nah, I'll bow out.
In the evil campaign, Sauron sends the mouth of Sauron and Nazgul
Yeah, I don't
to
know what
muster wild goblins.
Okay, so we all know it's a Lord of the Rings RTS of some kind. We're all just don't know the title.
The game is a 2006 real-time strategy video game developed and published by Electronic Arts. The second part, yep.
Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth.
No.
Brody.
Sorry,
Is it close?
Shannon was next.
Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2.
Yeah.
Oh, God damn it! I forgot it was a sequel!
Look, I deserve that. I don't even feel bad.
God damn it. That was me literally pulling words out of my ass, and I forgot it was a sequel.
Well, very productive ask you.
Gollum's Revenge.
Damn it. Gollum's Revenge.
Gollum's Revenge.
That's the next game.
That's going to be next week's episode.
Okay, last one, hopefully.
Wow, it's live. It's live and firing, isn't it?
It really is.
The gameplay in this game is an amalgamation of action role-playing and survival horror. The developer achieved this gameplay design by rendering the experience as a first-person shooter and adding character customization and development, which are considered signature role-playing elements. Sorry, that was not me, obviously. The player uses melee and projectile weapons to defeat enemies, while the role-playing system allows the development of useful abilities. Navigation is presented from a first-person view and complemented with a heads-up display. The game takes place on board a starship. The player assumes... Yes, Ewan.
Is this Dead Space?
It's not Dead Space. Brody.
Feck.
System Shock.
It's not System Shock.
Ewan.
Shannon.
Yes,
Titanfall.
No,
What
Shannon.
the fuck?
I don't know.
The player assumes the role of a soldier trying to stem the outbreak of a genetic infection that has devastated the ship.
Ewan.
Gameplay consists of You're out, Yui.
Damn
Gameplay
it.
consists of first-person combat and exploration. It incorporates role-playing elements in which players can develop skills and traits such as hacking and psionics. Everyone's back in.
Brody.
Yeah, Harry.
Is it?
Harry, was it
Ewan.
Harry first?
I've got lag.
Prey?
Thank you.
Is it Prey?
It's not Prey. Brody, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll have a chance on PsyOps.
No.
Okay.
The backstory is explained progressively through the player's acquisition of audio logs and encounters with ghostly apparitions. I'm going to skip to the last paragraph for the sake of time.
Why do I know it?
The game, you're all going to kick yourselves. Yeah, Ewan.
Shannon. Yeah,
Are we going to kick? Is it
Quickly.
Soma?
No.
Shannon. It's
Yes.
not Bioshock, is it?
No, it's not.
Ewan.
Where do I know that?
The game is a 1999 action role-playing survival horror video game designed by Ken Levine and co-developed
Brody.
by Irrational Games. Originally intended... Yes, Brody.
System Shock 2. I don't know.
It is System Shock 2.
That's
Thank
what I was
you.
gonna say.
Yeah, I figured that out too late.
Fucking hell.
Well done, everyone.
Sorry, I had horrendous
a
lag.
chaotic round. Well, Brody, you bagged the 2 points. You've reclaimed your lead with 16 to ahead of James. Shannon closing the gap on 10 points now, and Harry on 1 point. So points for everyone bar me. Unfortunately. But with that, let's bring that to what was this week's episode of the Press Start Podcast. Subscribe to us on Listener or the podcast service of your choice. Follow us at pressstart.au and visit the site at pressstart.com.au, where you will find Harry's review of Diablo 4 and James's review of Street Fighter 6, amongst all the other news and reviews and editorials and bargain guides and everything else we write over there. We've been joined today by James.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at JamesATJAMZ.
Also joining us today was Brody.
Thanks. You can follow me on most things at Brody_DG.
I sense Brody's internet's starting to
Progressively.
Gollum's starting to get in there and he's playing around with all the wires. Joining us for the first time in a long time, it was Harry.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at Harry_Kallo, Kalo.
And lastly, I was going to make some sort of Gollum reference, but
My precious, you could have called me and that
My
would have been
precious.
The Gollum stand.
It was Shannon.
You can follow me at Shannon Grixty.
And I've been your host, Ewan Roxburgh. You can follow me on Twitter at Ewan_Roxburgh. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, happy gaming.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.